Hi there, my name's Nikolas Badminton. I'm a futurist. I help my clients look out 5, 10, 20 plus years into the future so they can do better strategic planning today and anticipate the risks that we may face. And I'm incredibly excited to be speaking at Transporeon's Carrier Convention 2021 about exponential logistics and where the industry may go. Now, my role as a futurist was formed early in my life. I was 8 years old. My father gave me this book. This is the Osborne Book of the Future. And it looked to the year 2000 and beyond. And whilst it was a little bit too advanced, lunar colonies and such like, it indicated to me that there was an interesting world. I went back to university and decided to study artificial intelligence. I was in data for 20 plus years. And for the past decade or so, I've been working with some of the world's largest companies on designing futures. And part of that work is helping them shift a mindset from what's happening today, the plans, the next 3 months, 12 months, 18 months, to what if. What's going to happen in 5, 10, 20 plus years? What's going to happen in 100 years? When we start to open our minds to the futures and becomes futures literate, and we start thinking about those futures every single day, we can start to think about the bigger visions for our companies and what we can put into place today to make our companies resilient. But to do that, I like to look back in history a little, back to the industrial revolutions that started 280 or so years ago. And they were defined by 3 clear dimensions of transportation, energy, and communications. And those 3 dimensions today find us in the 4th industrial revolution. Communications travel faster than ever before through social media and beyond. We've got renewable energy and we've got automated transportation. Everything's connected, everything is internetized, and that defines the 4th industrial revolution and where we're headed. But we've seen a weakness in that industrial complex. It's taken a pandemic to see everything from transportation systems, hospitals, schooling, globalization, democracy being shaken to its core. So there's been some great lessons over the last sort of 15 months or so. And let's hope that we take some of those lessons forward to start reimagining how our businesses can operate. It's exploded our industry, but it's also helping us rebuild it in whole new ways that can be profitable and resilient. And this presentation goes through a number of different aspects, or what I call the signals of change. These are groupings of different things, everything from climate change to automated logistics that tell us about how the world is going to change. If we can see these things today, then we can imagine what the future is going to be. And the first thing I like to look at is global shifts and where we're likely to look in the future. Obviously, the pandemic has helped redefine what the world is and how that's been operating. We've already spoken about the fragility of the industrial complex. There will be more pandemics in the future. Bear that in mind. Are you going to have a plan for pandemics? Well, I certainly hope you will. And we've certainly seen the global supply chains really affected by that as well. There's a huge problem in China right now with the delivery of goods and COVID-19 exploding there. But we certainly saw with the Ever Given and the problem with the Suez Canal, 6 days blocking up 360 plus ships, over $9 billion worth of trade. And this is just one trade route in the world. And what's really interesting is that our logistics market is absolutely exploding right now. $12.2 trillion market size by 2022. And that's growing at 3.48 compound annual growth. And that's really healthy. And we're going to see that continue over the next decade or so. And why is that? Well, there's the rise of internet-based retailing. In 8 months last year, the internet e-commerce based retailing grew more than it would have grown in 10 years after that. The Internet of Things, everything being connected and internetized, the access to data, competitive business dynamics and change in the global economy, environmentally friendly logistics technologies, all of these things are coming together to transform our industry and change how we do business. But what's also going to change global dynamics is the shifting of power. The United States is number 1 today. That's going to be supplanted by India at number 2 and China by number 1 by 2030 in terms of strength of global economic force and their GDP. And China is certainly a force that's going to come to our industry in Europe and beyond. We're already seeing the Belt and Road Initiative starting to make inroads by sea and by road, and we're going to see that continue in the recovery beyond COVID-19 as well. And what's really interesting now, that shifts the other way for us as well. So from Europe into China as well. And this company just ran a trip recently, 12 days for a Dutch truck laden with automobile lubricant to make a 7,400 kilometer journey from Germany to Western China via Poland, Belarus, Russia, and Kazakhstan. These kinds of long-haul trucking and logistics is going to be our future, and we're going to see this free flow between the East and the West more often, and we're going to have to operate in these longer views and these longer trips, and we're going to have to think about operations more exponentially than ever before. And what's really interesting, beyond the East and the West and China to Europe, we need to start looking to Africa as well. We're starting to see a boom in world population in Africa. The average median age of a person there is 18 years old. We've got cities that are exploding in growth as people move from rural to urban environments. And really, Africa is going to be the great new frontier for us all. And 2.5 billion people will shift to urban populations by 2050. 90% of that will happen in Africa and Asia. In fact, when we start to see growth of cities around the world, which has been fairly evenly spread, as we look to 2050, and these numbers are from the United Nations and City of Toronto, we're starting to see a concentration around Africa and Asia. And when we look to 2100, which is a bit more of a further future, we can see that there's a concentration of growth and explosion of urban populations. Think about this, Lagos having a population of 88.3 million people. What's that going to look like? There's certainly a huge amount of logistical challenges, but also logistical opportunity as well. Okay, let's get into the signals, and I always start with climate and energy. So the world is getting warmer. We're not hitting our Paris agreements anytime soon, and we need to really focus in on reducing the CO2 that we pump out into the atmosphere, and logistics and transportation is a big part of that. And to do that, we need to start thinking about shifting our way from fossil fuels in industry to using renewable energy, not only the generation, but the usage of that. And Carl Burkhart looks out to that future and starts to think about, what if a number of countries were to step into that world? Well, change is going to happen quickly. In fact, a $1.8 trillion investment in renewable energy could produce up to $7.1 trillion in economic benefits. It's just going to create a better world from so many different angles. And in fact, our new world is going to be powered by electricity, and that electricity is going to be passed around and traded in real time very, very cheaply by global supergrids. We're already seeing these happen in Asia. We're already seeing these happen in Europe and the UK as well. Everyone interconnected. Think about this. The internet started in 1993. We're starting this initiative now. By 2050, 2060, this is going to become a reality that's shaping our world. But if we look at electrification, I drive an electric vehicle, but passenger vehicles are really growing at a great pace, as well as municipal transportation buses and also small transportation like 2- and 3-wheelers. Vans and trucks and industrial transportation is pretty slow out of the gate, but that's not surprising considering the longevity of our rolling stock and us really having to invest a huge amount of money in that shift as well, but it's coming. In fact, over time, light duty, medium duty and heavy duty vehicles are going to start to really lean into electric, and diesel and gasoline is going to reduce. Fuel cell and natural gas is going to be part of the mix, but very, very small parts. In fact, 2% of vehicles in the EU, trucks are responsible for 22% of road transport carbon emissions. So it's more important now than ever to really take a step forward and to change how we operate. So companies like Hyundai have invested in hydrogen electric fuel cells, and the Exient fuel cell vehicles are really interesting to look at. In fact, 1,600 of these vehicles are going to be in Switzerland by 2025. And they've got around about a 400 kilometer range. And once we've got an infrastructure to be able to recharge those cells and refill those cells with hydrogen, then we're going to be in a good position to replace that gasoline and diesel. But what's really going to shift the world is how cheap batteries are going to get and how efficient electric drive trains are going to get as well. That fuel density and electric infrastructure within vehicles is going to be so important. And we're seeing it already. We've seen Tesla promising the Semi. We're seeing fully electrified passenger ferries in Norway. We're seeing fully electrified ships in China. This is actually a ship that travels up the Yangtze every single day. Only about 40 miles there and 40 miles back. And when it's loading and unloading, it recharges in about 4 hours. Ironically, it actually takes coal up and down the Yangtze as well as other goods. But China's really leaning into municipal transportation and the electrification of that as well. So do watch China, because we're going to start to see a lot of the heavy industry and the logistics and trucking and trains and such like really shifting to electric as well. And we're starting to see this in trucks. Daimler, Arrival, Navistar, Cummins, Mercedes-Benz and Tesla. It's interesting how half of these companies weren't even here 5 years ago, right? So the world is changing and there's going to be new players. And there's going to be new players in the logistics world as well. But what's really interesting is we've got technologies like Rivian, which is a new passenger truck coming out, but they're coming out with small vehicles and Amazon invested in them. There's going to be 100,000 of these vehicles delivering goods around North America to start, and they're going to come into Europe as well. So all sides of the transportation spectrum are starting to be really revolutionized by electrification as a whole. Okay, so let's look at automating logistics and the use of artificial intelligence to really drive the trucks that are out there on the road. What's really interesting is that once we start to shift into an autonomous world, 78% driving availability becomes a reality versus 29% today. But really, we're starting to see a huge shortfall in drivers in Europe this year. So about 17%. We can see similar trends in Mexico, Russia, Turkey, and almost 1/3 of drivers reducing in Uzbekistan as well. But let's look at some of the changes in the autonomous world. 2018, a company called Embark undertook a 2,400-mile trip from LA to Jacksonville, Florida. And it was the first time a fully autonomous vehicle had done such a thing. And then there's a company called Too Simple that managed to complete what would be a 24-hour trip in only 14 hours, fully automated, 951 miles from Arizona to Oklahoma City as well. And what's interesting is that it did this with only slight oversight from a human driver. And their big idea is to start building out an autonomous freight network across the United States. These technologies are going to be proven and then brought back to Europe. And this is going to be really interesting as well as that pushes out into Asia and also down into Africa as well. These are the proving grounds, and the 2020s are going to be a really exciting time for autonomous technology. What's also interesting is that we're going to be playing with different models of autonomous transportation. A company called Ike, which is now owned by another company called Neuro. These are all new companies, as I mentioned before, are doing point-to-point delivery, but between different terminals. So what you'll have is you'll have drivers at a start terminal, a destination terminal, and the drivers will take over for the last few miles to fulfill the delivery. I think that's going to be a reality because cities are pretty complicated places. And I do think that there's still going to be humans involved with autonomous trucking. But Walmart's going big in on this. They've got autonomous box trucks planned for a number of cities, and they're starting to do trials now. These are not even going to have drivers, but being able to do autonomous delivery from Walmart and to really add that to the might of their already powerful retail empire is going to be really interesting. It's going to help them expand their growth globally as well. And there's a futuristic Einride truck from DB Schenker as well. I mean, it doesn't look of this world. It certainly doesn't look of these roads. But as we start to look at platooning and that opportunity, and we start to look at autonomous highways, I think that we're going to see things like this going forward. Okay, the future of how we run our companies is going to be bionic. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's going to be driven by data more than ever. the collection of data and turning that into usable information is what we do. Our lives are populated by spreadsheets, and I can't wait until they get out of the way. But really, the value is there as we start to tap into the knowledge across our networks, in our organizations, with our partners, and we start to make that into wisdom. And the wisdom economy is really driving the future of the world as we look at it. And that wisdom economy is driven by more digital interactions every single day. By 2025, we're going to have over 4,900 digital interactions every single day. And you can actually think that that's going to be exponential within a business context as well, with all of the people there. But then when we start to think of bionic companies, I think about behavioral, cognitive, and network capital. Behavioral, what people are doing and how things are operating. Cognitive, how people are thinking, the algorithms that drive our business. And network capital, those psychological and network effects within our businesses, the connections, the partnerships, how we operate, how we communicate, and how we work. And this new model is going to help companies really explode. We've already seen companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook and others really take advantage of that. But 88% of businesses worldwide really are planning to automate their businesses even further. In fact, that robotic automation is going to be a pretty standard capability. And do take a look at this video that I put together that shows some of our world today being impacted in this way. So that's a pretty fantastical video. Lots of speculative futures and ideas of where we could go from Rolls-Royce through to Amazon. And those Amazon blimps and drones, pretty fantastical. I think that was part of an April Fool's joke last year. However, the April Fool's might be on us because there's a patent that's been awarded to Amazon around doing exactly that. But we're looking at a world driven by artificial intelligence. But there's also a flip side to this as well, which is intelligence augmentation. We're going to be human and the machine within the logistics industry. We're not going to have fully automated companies. We're going to have to really look to the humans within the systems that start to think about empathy, creativity, problem solving, strategic thinking. And that's really what's going to power the business. AI is going to supercharge that as well. And that's what's really interesting about going from the old world of data to the new world. The data and information cycle is automated. Maybe it's the end of spreadsheets finally, and we're going to derive more knowledge and wisdom going forward. Okay, let's look into the further future to orbital freight. So SpaceX has made incredible leaps forward with the idea of a suborbital logistics and the delivery of goods from one side to the planet to the other very quickly. In fact, their CEO has promised that in the future we'll be able to take goods from New York City to Shanghai in around about 40 minutes, which absolutely shatters the 15 or so hours that it needs today. Yes, it will be expensive. Yes, there are some goods that really need to move that quickly. So that's going to be a booming market. But it's also going to be a booming market as we see more commercial space habitats out there in the atmosphere looking down on us, and being able to take goods up there cheaply and bringing things back is going to be really interesting. And on the ground, logistics companies are going to have to be part of that supply chain as well. And NASA's taking us back to the moon to establish a lunar colony with Artemis in 2024. And what's interesting about that is once we've established that, then we've got a jump off point to get to Mars. I personally don't know why we want to go and live on Mars, but it's interesting from a research perspective and also potentially an interstellar transportation perspective as well. And this is the vision of SpaceX again, and Elon Musk is very bullish on getting us there. So let's come back down to Earth and look at logistics in 2030 and beyond. And here are 5 predictions that I think that are going to show us the way forward. The first one is going to be that same-day delivery becomes same-hour delivery at their final destination. The speed of logistics is going to be under the microscope, and it's going to be the thing that we focus on more than anything else. Part of that is that point A to point B is going to be unbundled as business models shift from integration to aggregation of services. And to support that, transportation volumes in warehouses are going to be reduced, and warehouse size is going to be reduced with smaller spokes. So we're going to see that decentralization of storage of goods. And I think that's going to be incredibly interesting in urban situations. I do think that the fourth prediction that I'm looking at is going to be around the autonomy of fleets. I think semi-autonomous and fully autonomous is going to be 50% of the fleets that you operate by 2030. And there's going to be a huge amount of investment over time, so get ready. But I think the final one, and we already spoke about this, is that the urgent goods are going to be shipped globally via sub-orbital delivery. And I kind of love this idea that we're heading into the space race, but we have to kind of work out, what's going to be the best way to do these things and what we truly need. Maybe it's vaccines for a future pandemic. Maybe it's very important people. Is there going to be risks at the beginning? Absolutely. Is that the opportunity to really look into the future? Most definitely. So, as a futurist, I look at strategic foresight. I just want to take you through how I look at the world and how I work with clients. Once we imagine the future, we can build a bigger vision and strengthen strategic planning and anticipate risks today. To do that, I deploy my foresight development framework. It's a simplified way of looking at our futures. I look at the principles, I look at the signals, very much like we've done today, and I hypothesize on scenarios of how the world might be, very much like I did with my predictions. And then I work out how things change financially, organizationally, regulatory, culturally. I work with teams and organizations to do this because there's wisdom in that organization we need to unlock to imagine the futures ahead of us, 5, 10, 20 plus years. And once we understand the projects and initiatives, then we can create those future narratives that help us backcast the kinds of activities we need to start thinking of today. Firms that have high future preparedness can expect on average 33% higher profitability and a 200% higher market capitalization growth when compared to the average. Now, Rennie Rawbrook and his team finally got around to doing studies like this in the past couple of years that really validates that looking towards our futures is a really valid exercise for all businesses around the world. And in the past 15 months, my business has exploded and I've built out my team, and life is getting really interesting with people looking to further their thinking around future horizons and to build bigger visions, because the longevity of their businesses is the business that we're in. And that's it, shifting our mindsets from what is to what if. What if the world was going to operate differently? What if we adopted new technologies? What if we revolutionized our business models? And what if we worked more closely together as an industry whole to make the world a better place? That's exponential logistics. That's how we're going to operate. And thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions.